So today we kind of want to talk about our level design process in particular towards the persistent universe and how that differs from what we consider traditional level design processes. Both of us can come from a very traditional level design process, which is you're building everything very bespoke. You start with where the level what the level goal is, where it starts, where it ends, and then everything getting from the start to end is tailor-made, and the path is completely chosen and tweaked and tuned by the designer as well as the artists until the product ships. With all of the challenges that we need to build and solar systems that we need to build in S42 as well as persistent universe, we couldn't use our traditional experience from there. So we started talking about a modular system, and what that will allow us to do is basically build archetypes of things, and then from there go through and start switching out different modular pieces. So why don't you kind of run us through like a truck stop? Or
our greatest challenge is like, how do we populate a universe that is the size of our game with enough content to make it feel alive, right? We have 100 solar systems in the game. We might have 50, we might have 100 space stations. Even if we have 100 space stations, we're looking at 10,000 locations which we have to build. And with the small team we have, 4 level designers, it would take us about 650 years to build that the traditional way, which was...
It's totally achievable in our lifetime.
I mean, it's a long-term job security, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, the only way we can really do that is like Todd said, is like with a modular system. We do build our locations with a tile set, which is small pieces of walls and corners and doors that we put together into rooms. But this is still not fast enough. We have to find a quicker way to do this. So the way we can approach this is to looking into grouping these smaller tile sets into bigger entities, rooms. We have kitchens, we have toilets, we have locker rooms, we have lobbies, we have everything that you can imagine that you need on a space station to
make it feel believable.
Yeah, exactly. So instead of building every location unique, we build these rooms, we populate a big library of assets, and then we use these assets to put together the station itself in a much quicker way.
Correct, but even then when we're talking about like a base level of an archetype or something like that, we're talking about a very neutral feel and look to that, so that when we start adding these modular pieces in a hub section or something like that, that you don't really notice, like if those base assets are in that neutral set, then you really start noticing the repetition and everything.
So I mean, when we build things, we build everything using a template tile set, which is a complete, as Todd said, like a neutral. It has no textures and nothing special on it. And then we build out the basic shapes, and we define the purpose of the room, and then we can convert that into many different types of themes, low tech, high tech, all the things we have. But we also have another level on top of that, which is the content of the room itself. So when you do a game that is an MMO, almost all MMOs use some kind of modular system or some kind of tile set to build their locations. You will always see repetition at some point. You will go into a location and say, well, I've been in this room before, and we want to get away from this. So we've gone through many iterations of the modular system. We try to figure out how can we alleviate this in the best way possible. How can we make sure that even if it is the 5th time you go through this very room, it still feels different.
And so we have a couple of different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Like Andreas said, we have the tile sets, so what we would consider low tech, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, as well as high tech, and then we have super modernism and a few other tile sets that will still need to be built and worked on. Then from there we have wear and tear associated with that. So there's dirt passes. How pristine is this truck stop? Is it in the middle of Crusader? So therefore there's a lot of money that's around that one. So that one will be in very pristine condition versus something that is out in the middle of nowhere, and it's super run down, and it feels more like a mom and pop or Route 66 kind of truck stop or something like that. Then from there we've got like what he was talking about with the actual props that go inside there. And then we also have the different levels of power, piping that can go in there, and so we can make it feel more like a derelict, or it's up and running, and it's got a certain amount of hustle and bustle associated with it, based off of the AI or what is happening in the solar system at that time.
Yeah. So if you go back to, for example, the props that Todd mentioned, that is something that it's a very useful tool for us to change up the feeling of a location. So the way we're kind of moving right now is that we won't actually create, let's say, a bathroom and fill it with all the props that it needs. What we'll do is we'll create the shape of a bathroom, and we'll fill it with area shapes and volumes which can spawn in assets in different constellations. And that means that you might go into exactly the same bathroom in one station and it looks one way. You do go into the same bathroom in another station and there's a different amount of toilets, there's a different amount of sinks, the mirrors are in a different place, so it looks different. So by using these kind of systems, we can get a great amount of variation from our smaller component of rooms and make the stations feel unique and different, even though you're actually playing through a similar room as you've seen before.
In the process, in us building this, I think we really started on this maybe, I want to say about a year and a half ago. And at that point, it was just Andreas and another level designer that was really focused on this. And now we have the other resources really coming in, meaning Art is coming in and working on how do we do this from an internal perspective, but also from an external perspective on the space stations, and how do we make these things have unique silhouettes associated with them, so that when you're coming up to it, you get a very clear read of what you're coming to, the size of it, and what is it meant to be? Is it meant to be a very large space station, or is it meant to be a small little space station out in the middle of nowhere? And then from there, we also have a tech artist / coder that is working with us to build our modular system, so that this will allow us to run this tool, which will allow us to take these different shapes and combine them together with unique points of interest in those, and then basically kind of randomize it, run through it, play it, see what it feels like, randomize it again, and then this will allow us to generate the stations that as quick as we possibly can, because we do have a lot of content that we need to fill. It's just building up these tools and building up these rooms and the pipeline, to actually flip the switch and really pump these things out.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the processes we're looking into is we won't have a level designer sitting and dragging rooms in a construction or space station. That's not how we're going to build it, because we have the libraries of all the rooms that we can use in a space station. We have all the procedural generation of the props that exist in the rooms. The way we're going to build it is that we're going to create a basic flow chart of a station, which indicates where rooms are supposed to be. You start with a hub, that you come from an elevator, you go into a hub, you might move into another corridor that has like a locker room or that has a diner attached to it, and we build this flow in a scripting tool. And then from that flow, we can generate a seed, and we generate a location. Basically, the editor will generate a location based on that flow. So taking the seed, we can generate many different space stations with the same flow that will look completely different, because it gets different types of bathrooms. We specify it needs a bathroom. So in one location it has a small one, another one has a medium one.
Different stores.
Different stores. It has different props in the rooms when you go into the location. So a space station will always look the same, but you can have another space station based on the same seed that looks completely different. So it might have the same hub, but they actually feel different because they have different props and they have a different layout of doors and connectors. So with that, a level designer could technically throw out 20-30 space stations in a day. But of course, we have to go in and double check all that information. We can't just generate ship to the persistent universe and it's like job's done. That doesn't work like that. We have to go in and verify the layout. So even though we can generate a large amount of seeds and a large amount of different stations, we still have to do the proper work. We have to go through check the consistency of everything, see that it works, see that we don't walk into a room and it's a door into space and everyone has a very bad day. That would be pretty terrible.
We don't know exactly how this will play out. I mean, we have our ideas, and I think once we're fully through the R&D phase and it can actually generate, 15, 20 different truck stops, we start seeing where the repetition happens, and then at that point it will be trying to work out how can we cut down that repetition. And then the other thing is since we'll have so many different archetypes, we'll be, ideally the player's not running into this area over and over and over again. We're still very early in the process. We're in white box phase, and this is really the artists have started to come in now and are breaking down these tile sets for the satellites, for the planetary outposts, as well as for the truck stop. Those are kind of the three main ones that we're focusing on right now, and each one of them, require kind of their own unique thought process on kind of the modularity and how those things work. The overall idea is still the same. It's just how do those things connect together is very different.
Mm-hmm. I just want to iterate, we're not planning on shipping 50 space stations per day. That's not what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah.
It's the possibility of generating the layouts. The actual
Yes.
stations will take quite a bit longer
Yeah.
because you still have to make sure that everything exists and everything works. So
With this modular system, this is really to build out what we would consider our lower or even mid-tier space stations. We will still have very bespoke layouts. So for example, if you think about Grim Hex, or you think about Hurston or Area 18, these are very bespoke layouts that we go through and do handcraft. In the future, I think all of us would like to see if this system would work in actually building a city and doing it procedurally. But this is really to build up the other 95% of the contents that is in the universe besides just these big bespoke landing areas.
the way work has evolved over time from being not only level designers but more kind of spatial architects, where when in a traditional game, when you build a level, you have to think about the gameplay, you have to think about covers and flow and where the enemy is going to spawn and all these kind of things. And this is not really what we're doing when we're building our locations, because we want this to feel real, we want it to feel believable. It should be a place where people live and work for months at a time. So when we build these locations, we have to think about how does rooms connect together, what is the flow, how would people actually build this? It's much more thinking about the space as kind of a living area for people instead of a gameplay space. And that is why the role of the designer, especially the level designer in this, has kind of evolved into being a little bit more than just kind of gameplay oriented.
It's less about path from point of interest to point of interest to point of interest. This is, and it's more about making sure that these areas feel absolutely believable. Mm-hmm. And that you understand that there was a thought process behind creating this.
Also, being a space game, it gives us a little bit extra, because if we would go to space in the future as the human race, we would build things modularly. Can't even say that word, even though I work with it a lot. So it is not that strange of an approach to take. You would need things to function between different stations for repairs and for expansion of other things. So you might end up going to a location in space and it's a pirate base, but you can clearly see that this at some point was an old mining outpost that after the ore ran out, it got transitioned over to a nightclub for mercenaries, and then it got taken over by pirates, and now you have this.
Which is basically what Grim Hex is.
Pretty much,
yeah.
It's all party there.
Yeah. This is actually where we're at in the level design process, and mm-hmm. I know it's taken us a long time to get to this point, but there's a lot of research and development that have gone into the process and how these areas are constructed, and it definitely hasn't been a simple task.
Measure twice, cut once, right?
Exactly.